So now we can proceed to present the basic classical model, okay? Which the way which I do it in my lecture notes. So, where is that? So we start with the core model. The core model. So this means one output only. The whole economy is defined in terms of one output only. Okay, which is so total output, which would be amount of core, is equal to profits plus wages plus rent. Okay? So rent. For simplicity and also because I want to focus really on the whole story about classical economics is really relevant because it gets you to Marx. That's the real. And in Marx, rent, you don't have rent. In Marx, rent is capitalistic rent, and he was completely right about that. In Ricardo and Adam Smith, rent is agricultural rent. Okay, it comes out of the ownership of land by aristocracy. Okay, and in Ricardo, it's due to the difference between the most fertile and the least fertile land. That is rent in Ricardo. But in Marx, everything is capitalistic. So rent too comes out of, it's a variation, it's a form of profit. That's what rent is in Marx. So I will eliminate rent now. No? So this is the Smith-Ricardo formulation, okay? Now of the relationship of the constituent part of output. In the case of Marx, rent becomes part of profit. It's capitalistic rent. Yeah? So, for instance, the rent, which is urban rent, is nothing but surplus profit, the profits which are appropriated through the rent position of urban buildings and so forth. So, if you do that, you would have just output equal profits plus wages. These profits are gross profit, okay, including depreciation. Bigger capital. Now I can transform this into, by using coefficient of production, I can transform this into more functional terms. So, in a core economy, output will be the result of two elements, okay? Of two elements. One is the quantity of capital necessary to produce corn, but because only we have corn, so basically it's how much corn we need to produce 1 unit of corn. You follow me? So it's, which means that I can express output as alpha K. Okay? K is the corn-made capital, so sacks of corn, quintals of corn, okay, right, which operate as capital, and that alpha would be the productivity of that corn capital. In other words, if the relation of production is such that you need say one sack of corn to produce 10 sacks of corn, alpha would be equal to 10, okay? You follow me? Similarly,
sorry, can you repeat this last part, please?
yeah, alpha is the coefficient of production relating capital to output. In other words, how much output is produced by 1 unit of capital. No? So if I have, say, corn capital is 1 sack, 1 quintal, 1 ton of corn as seeds, and if I know that given the fertility of land and so forth, to get 10 tons of corn or wheat, I need 1 ton. Okay? So this alpha will be equal to 10. Huh? Then wages is equal to the total wage bill in the economy. The total wage bill is the wage per worker times the number of workers, okay? Wage per worker times the number of workers, L being labor, okay? And then, finally, you still see if I write here? You still see if I write here?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the gross wage.
Huh?
Gross wage. Double.
Total wage.
That's the total wage.
Yes.
This is the unit
Yes,
wage.
yes.
Yeah.
Gross.
Then, labor also has a relation to capital. You know? So if you have to, how many people are needed to carry a sack of corn, to plant the corn, to carry the corn, to plant the corn. So if say one person is just one person needed to carry 1 sack of corn, or say you need for 1 ton of corn to be planted as capital, if you need 10 workers for 1 ton of corn. So labor employment is determined by N times K. These are the number of workers needed to operate a unit of corn capital. Do you follow? NK, right? Which then leads to, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, leads to 5, which is substituting this here, okay? So this, okay? That's a simple substitution. I put 4 into 5. This means that L becomes NK. I put W in front of it. You understand? 4 goes into 5. And now all this, all 2 and 5 can go here, right? So I will have alpha K, I won't put the number yet, alpha K is equal to P profit plus W, which means W and K. Now I want net profits at this point. Okay? This is gross output, but we have to take away depreciation. I will need net profit. Okay. So, total gross profit are equal to alpha K minus W and K. Why is this coming out? Why is this coming out? Minus W and K. Okay? This gives me gross profit. If I want to be truthful to classical economics, where all capital being made of corn disappears by the end of the year, right? If you plant the seeds, finish it. You don't have it as a stock. So I have to put depreciation. So to get net profit, okay, this will be net profit, is alpha k minus WNK minus dk, the depreciation of capital. The depreciation of capital is 100%. So depreciation is 100%. That's the yearly cycle, okay? So I calculate everything at the end of the year, so to speak, the end of the unit period. So depreciation in classical economics is 100% because it's fully circulating capital. So D is equal to 1. Right? So this means that this becomes a parameter essentially, is what it means. So I move, just rewrite this. So at this point, we can use P as net profit, okay? P is net profit. Alpha K without W and K minus dk, where d is equal to 1 to 100%, so is equal to 1. So that would be our sixth equation. Seventh equation gives you the rate of profit, which is very straightforward, and that becomes the very important thing. Divide everything by k. You don't need prices here because everything is in terms of one commodity, in terms of corn, so everything is commensurable as a result of that. So you don't need price. And you divide everything by k, you get the rate of profit, and it is alpha minus WN minus 1. Okay? Now it's interesting, look at this equation. That's a standard, very simple, banal linear equation, but it does tell you something. If you put WR here, it tells you that the rate of profit is strictly, uniquely, inversely related to the wage rate. That alpha and n are define the technique of production, right? Because these are technical coefficients. Alpha is a technical coefficient. It's how much capital you need for 1 unit of output. It's how much output is produced by 1 unit of capital. Sorry. And this is the labor needed to operate 1 unit of capital. Okay, so this, the value of alpha and n give you the slope, give you the inclination. Not the slope is determined, it's negative. The straight line is negative, because you can see here. This is a negative, it's minus, so the straight line is negative, right? In a linear equation, if this is a plus, the line goes up. If this is negative, the line goes down. Yeah? So, the value of alpha and n, they give you the degree of inclination. That's what they give you, okay? We are not interested in the degree of the inclination, so it can be any arbitrary degree. And we can draw this line here. This gives you this is called the technical frontier. Because this is the average, well, it's for one sector, but it is, so to speak, the representative sector of the economy. This gives you the average technique of production in the economy. Okay? That's that. And you can see the property is that as the weight, any change in the wage rate leads to a change in the rate of profit. So as the wage rate comes down, that's a notional exercise. As the wage rate comes down, the rate of profit goes up. So there is a strict inverse relation between the wage rate and the rate of profit. This is the linchpin of classical economics from Adam Smith to Karl Marx. The rate of profit and wage rate move exactly in strict inverse relation between the wage rate and the rate of profit. This is called the frontier, the technological frontier, because you can see also another property. Assume that there is another frontier here. Okay? Should be a straight line, that might be example. If competition prevails, under conditions of competition, if you have this frontier, the green frontier, the blue frontier the blue line should disappear. Right? Because any point, you can see that at this wage rate here, let's say wage rate A, B, C. Right? We have three levels of the wage rate. At level A, if I have this line, it can be also a bit like that, doesn't matter. I mean, I just do it rather as a shift. I continue, I have both a higher, for the same wage rate, I have a higher rate of profit. You follow? You can see that for wage rate A, the rate of profit hitting the blue line here, the rate of profit would be here, okay, for the blue technique. For the green technique, the rate of profit would be here. Same wage rate, higher rate of profit. Then this means that if competition prevails, this technique should die, should be discarded, cannot survive. It becomes inferior. It's called inferior technique. Okay. Because the classics had this view that competition compels the firms to always adopt the most advanced technique, and there are no barriers to entry and exit. In its normal state, the economy should be, if a green technique is invented, the green technique will dominate in the end, the whole economy, okay, because of competition. Yeah.
Alpha was determining the inclination, or how far it is out?
No, I just arbitrarily drew parallel. You can, it could be skewed.
But which factor was not determining how far it is out? Like the productivity factor was alpha, no?
Well, the productivity factor, therefore what you have to do is to formulate dynamic properties for alpha and n. Okay, this is determined by the evolution. So this is in one position here, and then over time you take the evolution of alpha and n, and so this will give you the new technique. So you must have a theory concerning, I'm not addressing this, concerning the evolution of alpha and n. You understand? Others would say, okay, if you have increased division of labor and blah, blah, then alpha will become more bigger and n will become smaller, no? Because more labor savings, more mechanized techniques, and that will give you a new shape. You understand?
Yes.
But the issue of techniques in classical economics is put in terms of superior and inferior techniques. That's it. That is it. Not in neoclassical economics. I'll just give you a little inkling about neoclassical. I don't want to put too much about neoclassical economics. In neoclassical economics, I have a different story, which you can actually graft onto this. And in neoclassical economics is this. So you have, so this is classical, okay? You can write the same diagram in neoclassical economics, which in fact the guy called Paul Samuelson did. Paul Samuelson, he was guru, super guru of neoclassical economics at MIT. I think it was the first Nobel Prize winner in economics. Paul Anthony Samuelson, he died at the age of 2 million, 3 years ago, I think. 3 years ago. He was 2 million years old. But you should have come across his name. Paul Samuelson is the founder of modern neoclassical economics at MIT. Okay, so you have a technique like that. Then you can have a green technique. Green technique should be straight line, okay? And then we can continue with another one, say, the red technique. Okay, that would be a neoclassical story. It means that you have a catalog of techniques. Because here only one technique dominated any one time. In the neoclassical world, which is the neoclassical world, marginalist world is essentially based on a theory of choice. Like you choose between apples and pears, you will choose also between different techniques of production. Okay? Now, is you have a catalog, and this catalog will give you, okay, there is a blue technique, there is a green technique, there is a red technique. Okay? And this means that as the wage rate changes, look what happens. As the wage rate changes, so you start here, between this point and this point, it is only the blue technique that operates. Okay? So not this point. Because it's wrong. Between this point and this point. Okay? You have only the blue technique operating, because you can see the wage rate gives you always, the blue technique gives you always the maximum rate of profit. You understand? Just take the wage rate, you can see the outward technique, as long as the outward technique is the blue technique, then this gives you the maximum rate of profit. Do you follow? Then, as you keep, these are all logical exercises, it's not reality, it's logical exercises. As you come down, you come down, you come down, the wage rate falls. You can do it in reverse, you can do it by increasing the wage rate. You can start from here and going up, it's the same thing. As the wage rate falls, okay, you will come to a point where you are here. At this point, any movement of the wage rate below, it is the green technique that becomes the outward technique. Don't you see? It's the green technique here. It's the outward technique. You follow? Then you keep going down, and the same story gets repeated for the red technique. So as the wage rate falls is the red technique. From this point onward, the red technique dominates. This means that these points are called switch points. That is that as the economy in this notional exercise hits this point or this other point, say A and B, as the economy, by moving along the production frontier, you actually hit first point A and then point B, you discard the technique which gives you the lower rate of profit, and you move to the more profitable, it's called the more profit maximizing, cost minimizing technique. Okay? So you have a substitution. There is no reason to have three techniques. You can have a blueprint, a catalog of many, let's say infinite techniques, because then you can draw a curve. I can draw this curve here. I can draw a curve like this, right? I can draw this curve. The brown curve you can see I can establish a continuity of infinite points, and I can have a spectrum of infinite techniques, which means that every movement in the wage rate, every movement entails a change in technical production. Not in classical economics. In classical economics, if I don't explain why I have the new technique, why I have the green technique, so we go back to a situation in which, what have I done?
Just here, press this blue
Right
button.
next to the Chrome. No, right?
Near to Google Chrome.
Yeah, right.
No,
Where?
right.
Google.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one?
Yes.
Okay. So, if I take away the green technique and redraw the blue technique, there is no substitution. The technique remains the same. Only the rate of profit and the wage rate changes. Okay?
So it means the technology,
Stays the same.
stays the same, and every people can come.
Forget about, yeah, it
Yes.
means that the distribution of income between wages and profit
Yes.
changes. Here, the distribution of income also changes between wages and profit, but each change in the distribution means that there is a different technique of production in place, okay? Because you have a catalog of techniques, and the reason why you switch from one technique to another is that as you move down the wage rate here, this means as you move down, the wage rate labor becomes cheaper, and you are moving in reality toward more labor-intensive techniques. You see, if you move down with the wage here, you move down, this means that with wages, labor becomes cheaper relatively to capital, and therefore the technique of production of the economy becomes more labor-intensive. It's a principle of substitution, that you substitute always for the cheaper. If you are a consumer, you substitute for the cheaper product. If you are a producer, you substitute for the cheaper input. Yeah? This is the neoclassical story. Not in classical economics. You don't have that in classical economics. Okay? That's the only thing that I want to get back, because this looks simple. It's not simple. This is simple. This is simple. Start simple, end simple. This is not simple. This is a very convoluted story here, which is wrong, by the way. Yeah? Which is wrong. This is wrong. The graphs are correct, but the underlying theoretical structure is wrong. Okay? And we come to that. There's been a big debate which no one remembers anymore, but it's absolutely crucial debate. It's absolutely crucial. Big debate that happened between.
French Canal.
Huh?
French Canal and also.
Sorry?
French Canal.
No, that was about interest rate. There was an element of that in the, but there's a big debate that happened between the so-called the two Cambridge debate, between Cambridge, UK, and Cambridge, Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts. That was the big debate over capital theory. But in fact, it was a debate. It was called the two Cambridge. It was not Cambridge. One Cambridge was Italy. Yeah, it was done by Italians. One was a guy called, who lived in Cambridge. Was Piero Sraffa. The other two people were another, you'll have a paper that I've given you to read by Luigi Pasinetti in Milan, but he was in Cambridge for quite a while. And the third person who also he was never in Cambridge, got his PhD from Cambridge, and then he taught in Rome, Pierangelo Garignani. They are considered to be the Cambridge, because they were all the product of the economics of Cambridge, based on Piero Sraffa, based on a guy called Nicola Scaldo, based on They are all somehow related also to the story of Keynes. Remember, and so it's called Cambridge. It's not Cambridge, it's Italy really. And so there were these two debates between the so-called two Cambridges, and which happened between 1961 till the mid-70s. And the point made by the Italian and the English, and especially is completely correct, and it was accepted, but then it was, no notice was taken of it. And textbooks continued to be written as if it did not happen, okay? But the importance of that is that in the classical case, distribution does not depend upon prices. This is the important thing. The distribution of output between wages, profits, and rent is not connected to prices. It's independent from value. So value prices is the same. When they say value, they mean prices. You follow me? The classics, they called value. They called, instead of calling them prices, they called them value. Why? Because prices was what you get every day. Money prices, etc. They wanted to find the real value, what determines the real value of a commodity, the real price, the fundamental, what they also call the natural price of a commodity. But really, value and price is the same.
Yeah.
It's the same. So, in classical economics, value and distribution are separate. Okay? In neoclassical economics, everything is based on price. Everything is in price. Output is based on price, distribution is based on price, everything is on price. Neoclassical economics is essentially price theory. It's just price theory. So, the distribution of income between wages, profits, and what have you is determined by the price of the factors of production. Price of capital, price of labor, and so forth. You follow? This is what you have to know now. You have to know this. We have to focus on that. That in classical economics, you come to the final aspect, final building block of classical economics, is that prices do not determine distribution. And prices do not determine demand. Whereas in neoclassical economics, prices determine demand. Okay? This is the very, very important aspect. So, why is that the classics, and this is especially Ricardo, more than Adam Smith, why is that in the case of Ricardo, prices do not impact on distribution? I will explain to you in what is left, the time which is left. Ricardo concern was distribution. He was concerned about distribution. Why was he concerned about distribution? Because he considered that rent would eventually suffocate the economy. He considered that eventually rent would absorb, would prevent profits from being used. For Ricardo, profits mean investment, okay? All profits are automatically invested in the classical case. Therefore, if profits are sucked away siphoned off by rent, finished, no more accumulation, right? So he wanted to focus exactly on that. The explanation that existed at the time was that rents and profits were due, especially rents, were due to the high price of corn. The high price of corn was contingent yeah, was contingent. In classics, there is always a difference between contingency and long term. The contingent high price of corn was due to what? It was due to the Napoleonic Wars. So Ricardo wrote during the Napoleonic Wars, in particular, his first essay appeared in 1815, just when the whole thing ended with Waterloo. Okay, and he was, remember, he was a member of Parliament. He was a member of the Parliament. So, and then the Parliament has always this debate about the corn laws, whether should corn laws in Britain meant the protection of corn relatively to imports of corn from the United States, so to limit importation of corn from the United States, or whether to allow more importation. There was persistent debate about this sort of stuff. And people argued at the time, okay, the high price of corn is due because of the Napoleonic blockade around Britain. Yeah? And that's, which was what contingently it was true, it was not wrong. But Ricardo said, no, there is deeper stuff here. It's not just because of that. There's a long run issue here. The long run issue is the negative role of rents. Okay? Okay? And so what I want to do, I want to separate the movement of prices from the fundamental factors that determine value and distribution. From the day-to-day movement of prices, which are contingent, from the fundamental forces, factors that determine value, prices, and distribution. So what I want to find, therefore, what are the gravity, the gravitational point, like Newton, the gravitational point of the determinants of value and distribution. That's Ricardo. So he comes out in 1815 with an essay, which is called, it's in my notes, an essay on the profit of stocks, of corn, essay on the rate of profit on corn. That's his first. And in that, there he shows very nicely, he shows that first, that the rate of profit and the wage rate are inversely related. Okay? Secondly, he introduces the principle of diminishing returns, diminishing fertility to the land. He says, okay, as accumulation takes place, right, there is population growth. As there is population growth, more land will have to be brought into cultivation. So obviously, rationally, you first start with the most productive land, then you move to the less, you follow? You don't start with the least productive land, you would start with the most fertile land. As you run out of the fertile land because of population growth and so forth, you will bring in less fertile land, okay? However, the wage rate is fixed and subsistence cannot go down, okay? This is the theory, fixed and subsistence. So, if you have the first block of rate of profit must be uniform throughout competition, and there are two conditions. Subsistence wages and uniform rate of profit. There's two conditions. That's the competitive economy in Ricardo. Well, if you bring in diminishing fertility of land, rent will appear between the first and the second plot of land, you understand? Because that's the difference. Then there will be another, it's differential rent. Then there will be a third plot of land, rent will also appear. Eventually, you'll be bringing in just the last piece of land, okay, available. The rest is desert, Antarctic, whatever, you cannot cultivate. And as a consequence, given the uniform, the subsistence wage rate, and the fact that it must have uniform rate of profit, eventually you don't have profit anymore, okay? Eventually, everything, all the surplus disappears because the diminishing fertility of land makes the fact that the rent absorbs everything else except for the wage, for the subsistence wage. Hmm? So that's his view, therefore, is that the economy is bound to stop, to end in a stationary state, not crisis, end in a station, no more accumulation. That was his view. He worked it out with a simple chord model, The one, he did not write it mathematically, it's verbal, but that's basically it. That simple chord model, you did not need prices at all. You did not, if you had one commodity, you don't need price, to understand, because everything is measured exactly in the same thing. And he came to the conclusion that unless you get rid of rent, then you're stuck. Essentially, you're stuck. Malthus was at Jesus College, Cambridge, and he was mathematically pretty well prepared. Marx hated Malthus, he hated him completely. Reads this and says, there's something, no. And then he writes back to Ricardo, he says, look, your essay makes sense, but only if you have corn, one commodity. If you have many commodities, not just corn, what happens? It doesn't. Your argument, how do you extend your argument? It's called in economics, how you generalize, how you make a general argument out of the case of the corn model. You have to have several commodities to convince me. Not to worry, says Ricardo. Ricardo replies and writes a book. The famous book of Ricardo, 1817, is Principles of Political Economy and Taxation. Yeah? That's a reply. He actually, under the title, the subtitle is a reply to Malthus. He replies to Malthus by writing the whole book. No, it's not a big book. It's relatively short. It's not like Adam Smith, hundreds and hundreds of pages. He says, listen, I don't have a problem because it is true. Outside the corn model, I have to introduce prices. That's the only way in which I can. How can you compare if you have corn and iron, for instance, if you have corn and textile? How you can compare? You can compare only by through prices. So I have to introduce value. I introduce value. I tell you. Value, the price of a commodity, the relative price, the way in which they exchange, is determined by the quantity of labor time necessary to produce commodities. Labor embodied, not labor commanded as Adam Smith. Don't like this.
We had ones.
Which did here? No.
Just
Doesn't matter.
anywhere.
Forget. Let's forget. Okay, so he says, every commodity is priced according to the amount of labor time necessary to produce. So if commodity A requires 10 hours to be produced, in the normal technique, not in an inferior technique, the normal competitive technique, and if commodity B requires 5 hours to be produced, the price is 2 commodity B for 1 commodity A. Okay, that's the term. This means that what is the labor time necessary to produce commodity? Is the technique of production. Okay, that's what it is, because the amount of time that it requires to produce a commodity is not whether you are looking somewhere else or whether you are. The amount of time is determined by the procedure to work, and the procedure in working, in production, is technical production. It's not scope that defines the technical production. So the technology determines the price of commodities. You follow? That's in the regard. So this is okay. Once you define in that term, you can see that the value of a commodity is independent of distribution. You follow me? Because distribution, you find it inside the value. The value is the envelope of distribution, right? Distribution is inside, because out of that value, you have to divide it between wages, profits, and rent. You follow? Yeah. So if I use the labor theory of value, says Riccardo to Motus, then I'm still lacking the corn model. There's no difference. But I have many commodities this time. In the corn model, I have only one commodity, corn, and I don't need prices. In many commodities, I need prices. I need prices. I want to have the same theory, though, which I developed for the corn economy. Therefore, I say, okay, prices are determined by the quantity of labor time necessary to produce commodity. And that is it. So the technical productions determine prices, okay? And distribution is determined inside. Not by prices, determined by the relationship between classes, essentially, between workers, capitalists, and rent. Rent does not determine price, okay? Rent is not determined. Rent is an appropriation due to the different fertility of land. Does not determine price. And Motus would have accepted that. That's not the issue. Motus gets that and says no. Says, look, you've got a problem here. And by that time, Riccardo had enough, okay? Because and he says, you've got a problem. Why? Because of what Adam Smith pointed out. He said, it is true what you're saying, but only and only if either everything is produced just by labor, running after the beaver and the deer, just by labor. So I measure, the only technique of production you have is labor. This means that the difference of the technique is that you need to run more after the beaver than after the deer. That's okay. That's the difference in the technique. Yeah. Or if you have inputs like capital machinery, that the proportion between capital and labor is exactly the same in every single sector, so that you can focus only on direct labor. You follow me? If, however, the proportion is different from sector to sector, from branch to branch, okay? Say, except for the deer, you just have to prepare a little trap, okay? So you don't need much capital. But for the beaver, you need a complex thing. You have to build a barrage. You have to trap the beaver because it's much more deft than the deer. Then you have much more. Then you can no longer measure things in terms of direct labor time necessary. Well, then Riccardo says, in the case you do not have the same technical production in every single branch of the economy, the labor theory of value doesn't tell you the price, or does not tell you the price independently of distribution. The changes in distribution may change the price. Changes in prices may change distribution. Do you follow? Because say that you have a very capital intensive, highly mechanized sector and the less mechanized two sectors, one very mechanized, another less mechanized. You should expect that in the highly mechanized sector, the price of capital charges, okay, would show up in the final price proportionately more than in the less mechanized sector. You agree with me, right? And this means that if there is a change in either distribution of prices, it will reflect. They are connected, distribution and prices. Okay, this is where the neoclassical came in.
Yes.
The next one, yeah? So your need separation between prices, between value and distribution does not work. That's what Malthus replied. And Ricardo, he really said, okay, listen, you may be right, but I think that my theory works 93% of the time. That's what he said. And in fact, there is the Chicago Journal of Political Economy in the mid-50s, a very important article by a guy called George Stigler, which is called the 93% labor theory of value of Ricardo. Okay, was published. Ricardo said, okay, listen, yeah, you are, in terms of the pure theory, you are correct, but look, I think my story works better, works in most of the time, okay? Then Marx comes. Huh? Marx is hyper theory, Marx, okay? Everything has to come down from completely abstract theory. And Marx reads this reply of Ricardo to Malthus. He already hated Malthus because Malthus was in favor of servants. He said that to have servants is a good thing because servants. But he wasn't stupid at all. He said, how can we get rid of all the output if we don't have servants who consume? Okay, so he was in favor of servants, etc. So Ricardo hated Malthus completely, considering the expression of, on top of it, Malthus was a priest. So, they hated him, total hate. I mean, he was already with Ricardo, he always allied himself with Ricardo, always supported Ricardo, always very faithful to Ricardo, all the time. Okay? And even when he criticized Ricardo for oh, you're so good, how come that you didn't see the problem? You know, how come you're so good? And when Marx reads this thing by Ricardo, the reply of Ricardo to Malthus, Marx says, you have done us a disservice. You should not have replied like that. I mean, he was dead, Ricardo already, but he communicated. You should not have replied this way. You should have proven that your theory is correct and Malthus is wrong, that commodities do exchange at values, at labor values, in their essence, not on what we see on a day-to-day. That if they appear, you know, in Marx there's always this Hegelian dialectic approach. So that if it appears that they don't exchange at values, it's because there is a capitalist trick underneath. Okay, and he explains what the capitalist trick is. Yeah, very intelligently, by the way. And so he says, I am going now to give the right answer. I am going, and he wrote the whole volume 3 of Capital about this. Okay, this volume 3 of Capital is about this issue. Most of it, not all of it, but most of it is about this issue. And this issue is still a big theological, it has become a theological issue. It is because the true Marxist academic especially, the true Marxist academic believes in the labor theory of value and therefore spends all his, mostly his, women don't care about this. But there are Marxist women and all, but they don't care about this. They don't have class, gender, this and that. But in the case of Marxist boys, Marxist academic, they spend most of the time, okay, of their life. They don't know anything, they don't know geography, they don't know politics, they don't know anything. they become Marxist and they become blind. Yeah? Blind. Because they spend most of the time trying to justify Marx. Because Marx attempted to solve the problem that Malthus showed to Ricardo, but he didn't really succeed. Okay? So, kind of, but not really. And therefore the problem is still there, so to speak. I don't care about this problem, but it is still there. And this issue, however, is not secondary, because that is what, in the Ricardian economics, until the rise of marginalism, Ricardian economics was the dominant economics. Sorry, it's not that people talk much about economics in those days. It's not like today, everybody talks about economics. You know? Everybody's it's like a pandemic. Everybody talks about, but in those days, there were discussions of, and the theoretical reference where Ricardo, all the time was Ricardo. So Ricardian economics, especially in Britain, where economics was really used in politics and so forth, Ricardian economics was the dominant form of economics. Everything was treated in Ricardian terms. But this issue, when out of Ricardo came Marx, and out of Ricardo himself came the so-called, in England and in Europe, to a very large extent, socialism in France was Ricardian. That is to say, Ricardian socialist. The Ricardian socialist said something that Marx rejected totally. They said that since value is produced by labor time is what determines the value of the commodity, the wage should be equal to the value of the commodity. You follow? That's the Ricardian socialist. And Marx rejected, because there was a very famous leader of the German Social Democratic Party that produced a program called Gotha program, and Ferdinand Lassalle was the leader of the Germans. And Marx, and he said exactly that. He expressed a Ricardian socialist position, saying, because wages, labor determines value, right? Therefore, wages should be equal to the value of what they produce. Right? And Marx wrote a pamphlet called The Critique of the Gotha Program, and in which he attacked that view. He attacks it, look, in a socialist economy, you will not have, because Lassalle put it in the framework of a socialist economy. In a socialist economy, you will not have wages equal to the value of what labor produces, because you must have investment, because you must have insurance, national insurance, you cannot give everything back to wages. It's impossible. Marx criticized as petty bourgeois the view of Ferdinand Lassalle. Okay? But out of Ricardo came actually the Ricardian socialist. And Marx, these two combinations, along with the fact that there was this big problem in Ricardo, that his theory was not really watertight, okay? Then came the marginalists. That's how the marginalists came. In particular, the Austrian margins, they were the first, because Bondamerk, they were the first because their objective was precisely to criticize the theory of profit of Ricardo and especially of Marx. Yeah? But profits are the result of surplus value. We'll come to that in a second. So this issue is quite important because this problem in Ricardo, the unsolved problem in Ricardo, is what opens the way to the marginalist as an alternative approach, as an individualistic approach, not as a class-based approach, like Marx tried to do by using Ricardo and Adam Smith and so forth. Okay, well that's basically the end of the story. And so what I will do tomorrow, I will do Marx. Okay, so get rid of marks and we move to the marginal state. Yeah. All right.
Sorry, could you just repeat what we should have read by tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow I have to ask something. I have to, because I'll send you a message. I have to verify with Turin. I put on what's called Moodle a paper by Luigi Basletti. But this paper shows when I open the file on Moodle. It doesn't show in your case. So I want to understand why there was this technical hitch, because I always forget how to operate Moodle.
And that's the only paper we should have read for the first
For the time being, yes, I take it easy.
All right.
Huh?
Ask your question.
Yeah.
Yes, it's about
By the way, did you sign the form?
no.
I'll just ask Antonio. So just don't go away. There's a box. Which box? No, it's here. Okay, good. Is this one?
Yesterday.
It's one sheet each time?
Yesterday we didn't sign it.
You didn't?
I think you didn't sign it.
No, there was. It was circulated yesterday.
Yesterday it was, and then I put it in this special place for safety.
No, it has been taken.
Oh, yeah?
No, I think it went back to Antonio.
What is that?
Huh? You just signed. In the classical competition means that independently of the type of it's free mobility of capital. So when you have a profit rate differential branch, you should expect capital to move without in the classical it's trying to diminish in return. Increasing marginal cost. In other words, increase output. 1%. Cost will increase by more than 1%. So you have diminishing. And the point at which price for the elastic curve market price is given. The curve is too small to affect price. The marginal cost ends up being equal to the profits. That's the point of view. Yeah. That's better. Yeah.
Okay guys, Michele told me that you're going to send an email telling exactly
Yes,
the G plus the expense.
Yeah. We have the first.
Because he's not here, Luigi Audi, which is in Lingodo. If you want, I can write the address. That's low faculty.
But I've copied
You don't know where exactly it is.
Yeah, because it shows on my, when I open it, and
For sure at
Yeah, but we
okay.
don't know the class, we know the room.
Okay.
So Kenny is going to tell us.
You can start the first. When you finish,
And this is the relationship.
the last person that has
And also the rent years and also the relationship defined.
My finger doesn't Yeah, we can say
They have, like,
summary of the lectures.
Yes.
Basically, no? So because at some point we lost one today and
Only at one point? One class?
I think for
But I didn't understand this from the beginning, so again.
No, because
Can you explain from the beginning
has
how
an
it
accumulative effect. So we have then like
that's the rest of the summaries. For tomorrow, you have to know. You have to class there. But you make exactly what. Anyway, yeah, no. To understand now because next time.
Hey, no, not mine. Why? Huh? Huh? I'm not? Smiling. Yes. Ah, thank you. You make it.
Don't remember.
La classe.
Yeah.
Now it's you start cleaning everything.
You started to clean
No, I
it.
started with the kids. That's me.
Bye-bye.
There is always something
Yeah, to clean.
chilling out. Make coffee and you
Clean it up.
they clean because it's brown things. Adesso alcune se ne vanno, queste che sono di Lituania sono in Erasmus adesso.
Party people.
No, they are always there. Because they have a big room, and they have like a table there. But who knows, they really party or something because they are always there. Today was the first time I saw when we were cleaning the apartment and they were like, well dressed, everything. And then when I worked later, they returned, they went to the supermarket.
I'm ready. Ciao guys. Ciao.
But are you still for this one?
This one I video, but it was nice. No, we have to, but she might not like because it's that. Yeah, from when we started.
Is it like constantly recording classes? That's strange. Yeah. Surveillance.
No, you may ask it, hey, what are you doing?
I'm gonna ask the camera. Yeah, what's this camera about? What's about? Yeah.
It's yours?
No, it's not mine. Can you go ahead and ask what's going on?
It's recording, I think. If you want, you can give an interview. Shall we go? Maybe you can explain the class of the day, like what people.
I can ask you what you think of
understand.
the PART theory of price and profit.
But I don't know if it's supposed to be still recording. Probably not.
Yeah, the red light is on.
Nice to go to the conference.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'll try to get